January 27th. We're here at our Common Council Planning, Economic and Development and Land Use. These go through roll call.
Sure. Tonight we are joined by myself, Jake Iceland, Research Council, Brian Jimenez, Policy Analyst. We are joined by Jason Thomas from Corporation Council, Fredo Valoran, and then committee members Deb Zaber and Sergio Adams.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Topa, I'll let you better pronounce your last name, but please join us right in front here. Thank you. Okay, and if you don't mind just starting out by telling us.
Recent Albany City resident. I applied for this position because I'm the sustainability manager at Union College. I grew up just in Voorheesville. We spent several years in the city of Albany when I was a child, so I really love the Capital District.
Excellent. Thank you for your willingness to serve on this committee. Any questions from committee members?
From what I see, you more than enough have the knowledge, let alone the experience to serve on this board. But you got it. I mean, in my eyes, this is.
Thank you.
This is probably one of the best ones that I've seen in a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your willingness to serve in your application, and from fellow Binghamton.
Yay.
If you haven't yet, or any ideas floating around there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of started off just attending. I think what they have a lot of passion and they have a lot of ideas. Disheartening to hear because it is important, but also understandable. So what we really need to be doing is tapping into skill sets that already exist, right? So we have a home improvement project. You can actually obtain that tool from the library. Obviously that does come with a financial cost, but it is significant. Figuring out how to sort of gear them towards sustainability initiatives, could be really helpful. I'm wondering sort of what the measurement for success of this position is.
You can see it as a volunteer part-time job.
Yeah.
You don't get paid for it, but you volunteer, and we appreciate that. Initiatives throughout the years, specifically, making sure we have recycling bins in our events, making sure, as well as the mayor's office, to see how we can be a more sustainable city. But I'll let any of my colleagues, if you want to, and non-for-profits, you can fire a volunteer, and non-for-profits, you can fire a volunteer if they're not doing what they're supposed to, or they're not being reliable. But you also have to remember that they're a volunteer, so you don't want to put too much on them where you may lose a good volunteer. So it's that delicate balance that I'm sure we were also struggling with. But I like the idea of evaluation. I don't think we ever done that for any of our boards.
And it's also, if I may, I'm sure the commission and would want the public to know what work you're doing, and so you'd certainly want a mechanism to communicate that.
Any other questions?
I think that's it.
No? Okay. Well, thank you again for applying. We appreciate your willingness to apply for the position and your time you've taken to meet with us today. The process that we're going about, we had interviews last week. Was it last week? Or 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago. And we're doing interviews again today. And once we interview all the candidates, we'll be discussing what candidates we'll move forward with, and then let everybody know at the same time. Okay? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, next is another interview for the Sustainability Committee. Richard, is he here? Okay. Okay. Okay, we're back on, and we're here with Richard Daly. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. Thank you for your willingness to apply for the openings that we have in the Sustainability Committee. Please just tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as why you've applied for this opening.
Sure, so you got the name pretty good. I'm Rich Daly. Hello to everybody. It's quite the welcome I get here. Very official feeling, but yeah, I just applied because I wanted to be more involved in the community. I do a lot of community work as it stands and saw the opportunity. I have actually interviewed once before in the past. I think it was subcommittee something or other many years ago, but guess I was turned down. But here I am again, and yeah, I just feel like I want to do more work in the community around my interests, which are pretty sustainability oriented and certainly sustainability adjacent. And professionally, I run my own business. I have worked in the field of education essentially my whole adulthood in various different roles, from a teacher, both in public school, private schools. I was a vocational institutional leader, director of a school, and I've worked in nonprofits. So I do pretty much a mixture of teaching and consulting on topics pertinent to sustainability. Again, definitely adjacent, but certainly related. And yeah, I saw the opportunity and I said, why not? I'll send my resume over again, see what happens. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You got it.
Any questions from committee members?
Yeah, yeah.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Daly. Have you had in recent weeks or months been able to review the city's sustainability plan and familiarize yourself with what's in it so far?
Yeah, so I've taken a look, you know, and that's where I feel one of the reasons I applied is because I think, and I could be wrong, you know, some people may think maybe this isn't true, but I feel like I'd be a valuable person due to the fact that I can bring an outside perspective. Sometimes a lot of the sustainability plans are really focused on things like electrification and, you know, climate change, and feel like there's a broader picture that needs to be addressed within the community, at least from my experience. You know, one of the things, for example, electric charging stations are really cool, but not everybody can afford an electric car, for example. So sometimes there's other ways that you can make a difference in the community outside of these things. If there's a longer plan outside of the website, I'd have to admit I haven't read it fully. You know, if it's a long document, I'd be totally happy to read it, I'd be invested in it. But, you know, from my estimation is there's a lot of different facets of sustainability and what that means, at least to me, and everybody might have a different opinion on that. I think it's a kind of an ambiguous terminology sometimes, which is both problematic and helpful depending on the angle one's approaching it. But yeah, I know some of the general vibes of what the city's going for, if that's the question. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that response. The follow-up thing I was going to say was, you know, I do like the fact that, again, not only do you have the knowledge and experience working within the field, but you also have the education background, which I think is very important, especially when it comes to the community and providing that education and engagement to get people to really understand some of the initiatives that the city is adopting, or just communities are trying to implement within their own community garden, or have you so. Again, just wanted to say I do appreciate the community aspect that you bring along with the education, and I'll continue reading through your information, but just wanted to thank you for your time and thank you for coming in and submitting your application.
Absolutely. And if I could add one thing, is that okay for me to do? I do think that one of the things too, you know, I've been involved with nonprofits, I'm on a few boards, and there's a lot of Zoom meetings with a lot of talking, and I just feel like there needs to be a lot of focus on the community aspect and really getting out there. And I'm sometimes the opposing voice to, you know, a lot of people will talk about legislation and for something like composting, for example, which, yeah, there's a lot of really great ideas around that, but I think first and foremost, it's actually getting out there and explaining to people how they can do this, where the collection sites are, all of these types of things that are available to Albany residents and residents of a lot of different towns and villages in New York State. And I think that's a huge piece that's sometimes missing, is that I do believe that renting a library room and one or two people come and, that can make a difference. It's not always about legislation, so, yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember Segal?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for your interest
Sure.
in serving. On your resume, the agriculture teacher
Yeah.
in the Albany City Schools, that jumped out to me.
Yep.
I'm an alum of the public school system. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't have an agricultural teacher.
Yeah.
My kids are going through the school, so I'm curious about what that was like and what opportunities you see for connecting sustainability education to our public schools.
Oh, absolutely. So, my tenure with Albany City School District was a short one. I've come to realize that my strength is really with more proactive learners. I do still keep kind of a thread in the community. I run a monthly kids program at Honest Way Food Co-op, a gardening and nature club, and my time in middle school was experimental, to say the least, especially with the struggles of a city like Albany implementing or attempting to implement agricultural education. I think the Radix is a really good resource, and I know Scott, and I've worked with Radix, with kids from the district doing apple cider pressing and things like that. And I think there's a huge opportunity with agricultural education. I think Albany City generally, there's a lot of opportunity for urban agriculture. I mean, now 70% of Americans live in urban aggregations, essentially. So, and that's why I focus so much on the urban environment. That's a different conversation. But I think that getting kids outside is a huge, important thing in schools. And it's really challenging for teachers to have one more thing on their plate. Public school generally is very difficult. And just, it takes a lot out of somebody, and it takes a lot of dedication. And I feel that a place like Radix is a gold mine for Albany, to be honest, for the kids. It's such an amazing place. There could be more places like that, or different places like that. My wife works for Capital Region BOCES, and I think it's the career and technical education programs are it's really the best thing that public schools have. And with all the emerging technologies and renewables, and it's not just about solar panels, there's so many other things emerging that are really important. And I think there's huge areas of opportunity, and that's something I could talk for a very long time on. So I'd siphon myself to that if I fully answered your question, or you want me to elaborate on anything else?
Thank you. No, that's good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great.
Any additional questions by committee members? Do you have any questions for us?
Yes, so I would like to know, I guess, how many vacancies there are and how exactly the process works moving forward. That'd be great to know, and of course, I'm happy to answer more questions or elaborate on anything.
So, we always get a lot of applicants for these positions.
Really?
We do. I've been on this committee for a few years now, and I always feel like we have such a strong base of individuals that want to volunteer
Yeah.
specifically for this committee. So the process is we've got interviews today. We had interviews 2 weeks ago. We have 2 spots open.
Okay.
And once we go through all the interviews, we'll be reviewing all of our notes on all the different candidates.
Yep.
And making our decision based on what the committee says that they need at this time to move forward. That's what we really look for, because we don't want to have too many of the same skills in the room. We want to have different perspectives and different experiences. So that's the process. We do hope to have it wrapped up in the next 2 weeks.
Cool.
And then be able to let all the candidates know where we are. But I do want to make sure all the candidates know, such as yourself, that if you don't get selected, there are committee opportunities to, get engaged in. And we don't want anyone to lose interest, because this is something that affects all of us,
Absolutely.
one way or the other. So if we can get everyone engaged in activities for sustainability, we'd have a better place long-term for our future generations. So yes, I hope that answered. Did I miss anything, anyone?
If I may,
Yes.
there are 2 vacancies.
Yes,
Cool. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, you said that, yeah.
Oh, did you say that? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
that's okay.
No,
Alfredo.
that's good. Thank you, thank you. I have no political aspirations. I just want to, try to contribute to the community if I can, so that's why I'm here.
You're probably pretty good if you have political aspirations, so don't hold that
No.
back.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I would love to help. That's all I know. I think I could. I could be wrong, though. Who knows?
Do you have any other questions for us?
No.
Well, I want to thank you again for your willingness to come in and your willingness to serve, and also for the work that you've done in our community and in our neighborhoods. I see that you on the advisory board for the YMCA. I started my career at the YMCA, so I know that there's a lot of good work being done there.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but it was interesting. It was an experience.
Good. Well, thank you, sir.
Oh, cool. Thank you very much to everybody. Yeah.
Okay, looking to staff. We have one more interview? Or we all? Okay, I think we got one more interview. Okay. We got one more interview? Yeah. Okay, and our next interview is Alex Baguette. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Okay, so we're going to start off. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've applied for this position, as well as a little bit of how your skills, you feel your skills would meet the needs of the committee.
Sure. Hi. Oh, wow. That really is responsive. My name is Alexis or Lex, and I live in Mansion neighborhood in the South End, and I'm currently getting to know this microphone and like how to sit with this microphone. It's okay. Thank you. I'm currently a librarian and a gardener. So I work as a research librarian at the Small Business Development Center of New York. And then I'm a gardener. I've been very involved in South End Earth Day since I moved to the neighborhood. Actually, since about 2 years after I moved to the neighborhood, I've been really involved in South End Earth Day. And which, have all of you come to South End Earth Day? Who's been to South End Earth Day here? Sergio's been there. Anybody else? I invite all of you to come Earth Day. As you know, is April 20th, but that is also the day before Easter, so South End Earth Day will be April 26th. And South End Earth Day is a volunteer effort, is a catalyst for all of the gardens of the South End. It's organized by Radix and A Village, and they bring in many, many volunteers from UAlbany, from local companies like Regeneron, from student groups and Girl Scouts to come and like clean up gardens throughout the South End and give like an extra boost of energy to all the gardeners in the neighborhood. And it is, to me, like the greatest thing all year that happens in Albany, and I live for it. And I've worked really closely with Scott and Scott Kellogg and Stacy Pettigrew and all of their staff at Radix on South End Earth Day, and have just gotten more and more involved in that project over the last 8 years. So that's my biggest like personal connection to sustainability itself in the city. You know, it's like actually the direct activity of gardeners who are like getting their hand in the dirt, transforming vacant lots into both productive food growing territory, but also habitat for our migratory birds and insects, which is also super important. So that's my personal like experience and interest, but as a business librarian, I'm really aware of like all the disruptions and transformations that are going on in our world, like around like agri-tech and like new innovative businesses that are constantly looking for spaces, you know, and so that's another thing, like a totally different dimension, separate from my own like personal passion as a gardener, another strength that I feel like I can bring and offer to the commission. And as you all noticed from my initial invitation to tell you all to please come, April 26th, write it down on your thing. I am a constant outreacher, advocate sort of person, so that's the other thing that I bring.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Council members, any questions from council members? Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Alexis, for joining us this evening. You do have a diverse background with technology and literacy and just nonprofit. So it's good to see more candidates that have diversity in their background. Is there anything in particular around sustainability that you feel passionate about that you would bring to the commission?
Yeah, I mean, my big passion is like for people to, there's an idea out there that is called the backyard, the Homegrown National Park. So the Homegrown National Park is that like we are dealing with the problems of species collapse, especially with our insects, and we have to rebuild habitat. And the most effective way that people can do something about this is by transforming small lots, taking their front yards, taking the marginal spaces along roads, along highways. It's something that Albany County has done with our No Mow May and like the reductions in the pesticides that we use on the highways. All these things are about rebuilding the habitats for our migratory insects and birds, and that I feel like every person can do what they can. And I would love to know, like if I were on the Sustainability Commission, that would translate into figuring out if there's any way that planning could support or not dissuade people from utilizing marginal spaces or front lawn spaces as wildlife habitat. So,
love that. And just also a final question, have you had the opportunity to review the City of Albany Sustainable Action Plan?
I read something in August of last year, and I don't know if that was what that document was. Actually, I don't recollect because it was several months ago when I read whatever it was before I sent this letter in.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Questions from Councilwoman Seymour.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for your willingness to serve and for the service you've already rendered to our community. And I just wanted to say, I love that idea of, my question was going to be for maybe an idea or a vision you had for sustainability in the city, and a push to convert, as you said, marginal spaces back into natural habitat, I think was wonderful. So that's really all I wanted to reiterate. I appreciated that.
Yeah, so there's actually, you know, if it were to get, you know, if that were to become a project, if it could become a project, there's ways that we could see about how to connect the riverfront park up to the, you know, along the Normanskill and expanding that through the city. There's already existing butterfly gardens that have been established through Cornell, you know, so figuring out ways to find more connections. And then they all need oak trees nearby. They need like certain species to be nearby where these little gardens are. So the little gardens make spaces for the caterpillars to transform, right? But you need other spaces for the caterpillars to feed. They don't have the same species always in the same. So.
Thank you for that.
But that's pretty specific. There's other things, you know.
Are there any additional questions from committee members? Councilmember Adams?
Also, what is your availability and time commitment to serving on the commission?
I work from 8:30 to 4:30 every day, my evenings are free. I work for the Research Foundation, and so there's like some flexibility if I have to be at meetings in the day, I could work late to make up, or, I don't know. When I looked at the commitments in August, it said, I don't recall the number of hours, but I felt like it was feasible from the number of hours it asked for.
As long as you're confident that, you know, you could commit to it, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I do run into like a problem with daytime meetings, that's the only thing, so.
Okay, I think most of the meetings are in the evening and on Zoom for the most part, so that shouldn't be an issue. Any additional questions? Do you have any questions for us?
Scott Kellogg already told me about the meeting frequency and a little bit about the agenda this year. Well, what's your vision of the role of the Sustainability Commission, I guess, in your own sense?
Well, I'll just give you a little brief. I think, you know, we're looking for the commission to be that this is their focus point, to look at our policies, to look at our activities, to look at the city as a whole, look at what else is being done in other municipalities, to see what we can do better and what we can do to make our city a more sustainable city for our next generation. But I'll let any other committee members want to chime in. Okay, Councilmember Adams.
I think you covered, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'll make it quick. I was just going to say education. I think the education for the community is very important. Not everyone is familiar with sustainability initiatives, efforts, how to lead them, how to go about them. So I think the education on all levels, from small as a child to an adult, senior, is important. So I would love to see the commission participate and do more outreach that provides education to the community, whether that's, you know, again, online, using different methods or tools, platforms, or again, just being at different events and talking about it. Thank you.
I guess if this is my chance to ask you all questions, and since it's January 2025.
I'm going to let Councilmember Zema.
Oh, sorry.
No, thank you, Chair. I was going to say you covered it.
Oh,
So-
okay, no problem. No,
Nothing more to add. Thank
Yes,
you.
Okay.
so,
thank you.
you know, I just finished library school like a year ago. You know, one of the really big lessons that I took from we had a lecture one day on sustainability from the director of the Mid-Hudson Library System, and she's an expert in the country in climate transition, sustainability for public libraries. But, you know, her lecture begins with that every single institution must be a climate institution. Every institution has to be preparing for climate transition. So I guess my question for you, is that still accepted fact on January 27th?
If I may.
Because it was
You may.
6 months
And
ago.
I'm going to be brief because we do have another presentation
Yeah.
after you, but I would say we need commissions like this in order to help guide us, because we have our hands in so many things, obviously, in the city. But small things that I appreciate that the council does just for us work-wise, you know, it doesn't appear right now. I have your paper resume, but largely we are able to have all of our materials digitally instead of having so much paper, you know, copies. So small things like that, I think the city is really trying to look towards reducing their footprint.
But those are also recommendations of sustainability that the commission can make,
Absolutely.
or ways that you can actually reduce your own
Yes.
solid waste or carbon footprint.
Yep.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your willingness to participate in this committee, and as well as thank you for your willingness to serve. And we're telling all of the applicants, the process is we're interviewing all of the applicants today as well as 2 weeks ago. We have 2 slots to fill. Once we make a decision of who will move forward in those positions, we will then call all of the applicants and let them know which direction we went. I want to make sure all applicants know, if you're not selected to fill one of those 2 openings, you can still serve on several committees that are part of the sustainability committees. So there's still lots of opportunities to serve and be a part of the work.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You have a good evening. Staff, am I wrong to feel like I still hear some static in the background? Is that getting cleared up? Static? Is the static or not that bad? Okay, I feel like I hear it in the background. Yes. Okay, but it's clear in the streaming. Okay, excellent. Okay, so now we've got, I think that's all of our interviews, correct? So we've got the presentation for ordinance 65-111-24 in front of us. But before we go there, as they set up for that, I just want to discuss the Sustainability Committee. Do we want to make a decision today based on the 5 interviews that we had, or do we want to have a separate meeting to go over all of the candidates with more time? Committee, this is what I'm asking the committee.
Would we have to go into executive session right now?
I guess I just want to know, are you guys up for staying after the presentation, or do we want to have a separate meeting to look at all the candidates together?
I would prefer, oh, you want to do it tonight?
You want to do it tonight, or?
Well-
What were you going to say, Deb?
I would just need a few minutes. I want to sort of review the other
candidates
from
not
a couple
here?
weeks ago.
Okay.
But I will defer to my colleagues, to you two.
Okay, and Sergio, you want to get it all done today?
Is it possible, we have caucus on, Wednesday, though, but it's the ETEC.
Okay. Let's get through this presentation and see how late it is.
That does depend. That would,
At the attack. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let's get the presentation done. And then we'll go from there. Okay, thank you. Before we start the presentation, did you get an opportunity to go over some of the questions and concerns that were brought up at the last meeting?
Yeah, so I'll try to get to that. I think I answered or addressed most of them that had come up at the last meeting, but I'll try to do like a quick recap of that. I don't intend on going through all the slides over again, but I can give a recap of those. I'm just looking to load it up here. Well, while this is loading, if you're ready, I can start.
You can go.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'll just do hopefully a quick recap of what we went over 2 weeks ago for the sign ordinance. You know, a lot of the comments that were provided, I believe I touched on, but I'll try to address those. If there were any particular questions that anyone has too, I can go into more depth on that. But essentially, what the ordinance was doing was taking the existing table and creating 2 tables from that. Not sure why it's not sharing. Let's see here. There we go. Again, a lot of this was prompted by our research into the variances. It's not the only indicator, but it certainly indicates when a lot of them are approved, if they are specifically for signs, that that's something to look into. So that's really how this all began. In terms of the main issues we're trying to address, it was the number of signs, the sign size, sign height, illumination, and then there was a few other miscellaneous sign-related items. Again, this is an example of like the issues we're trying to address. So when we're looking at specific districts of the city, or zoning districts, say that's really where the crux of the issue arises. For the most part, most zoning districts are kind of okay. There's a lack of flexibility right now in the code, and that's what we're looking to introduce. But when we have districts like this would be the MU-CH. It's a district where signage is typically of a much greater size, and we're just trying to have a sign code that can reflect that. I know the issue of the Supreme Court case had come up, so again, just on that, the code's not there are no proposals to be regulating the actual sign content, and we're doing our best to avoid any type of speaker-based provision, so not regulating it against any specific use, like a gas station. So some of the comments and questions that had come up were about the definitions and the methods of measurement. I know there was a question about the height, so I think that was largely just because they were looking at an older copy of it that hadn't had the images in there yet. So these would be the images that are actually in the copy now. It did just go back and added the wording for the calculation for, on the bottom left there for sign height, to make it clear that we're talking about a detached sign, so that was added since the last meeting. Again, these are examples of how you would kind of calculate the different signage, the red dashed lines around them kind of representing the area. So some of the new information, just looking at it's kind of hard to compare the original and the proposed just because we split the districts a little differently. So for attached signs, which are the wall, projecting, canopy, things like that, the existing code for residential, the existing code places them largely into just two, well, really all into the same category. And it's one sign per frontage at 6 square feet, limiting that to multi-dwellings or commercial uses. Under the proposed one, the differences are pretty minor, so we split those residential districts up into really 3 categories because they do vary a lot, so it's very hard to compare your R1L district to the RV district. Here we'd be keeping the same thing for the R1L, R1M, R2 as they were in the existing code, so 1 sign per frontage at 6 square feet. And then for the RT and RM, since they do tend to have some, not many, but some commercial components or multi-unit dwellings in those districts, 1 10 square foot sign per frontage. And then for the RV district, upping that up to 1 20 square foot sign. And again, all of these being limited to multi-unit dwellings or commercial uses. So this is a map of the RV districts. That's something that had come up in the last meeting as well, just because that's the largest number we're proposing for residential at 20 square feet. So these are the RV districts. The reason I wanted to point these out, where you see the red highlighted areas, is that it's very different from other residential districts where the parcels within here largely encompass the entire zoning district that they're in. So where a typical low density zoning district, your parcel might be 70 feet wide by 120 feet deep. Some of these are several acres large, so the characteristics are quite different, even though they're both residential districts. For non-residential signs, so commercial or industrial, again, talking about attached signs, the existing code breaks them up into 3 groups or categories in terms of the actual districts. And it really just provides either a 20 square foot sign for the less intensive zoning districts or 32 square feet as the largest. Under the proposal, we'd be breaking up the non-residential zoning districts into 7 distinct groups. That does a better job of kind of encompassing the zoning districts based on characteristics and realizing that there are differences in all of those, but that's the best way we could kind of come to defining them a bit. So allowing for 24, 32 square foot for most of the commercial districts, but allowing up to a 64 square foot for more intensive areas such as the MUCH or the MUCI, and then 100 square feet within the I-2 industrial district. We're going to propose that for the I-1 because the I-1 does have many areas within the city that run adjacent to residential areas, so, but the I-2 is quite different, so we felt that the 100 square foot would be appropriate here. This is a map of the MUCH zoning districts. Largely what we're talking about here is going to be the middle red polygon there at the top. That's, you know, along Central Ave where we have a lot of the car dealerships, typically where we get a lot of the, if not most of our sign applications, and that's, you know, a large, largely what's taking up a lot of staff time, a lot of review time, and a lot of time for business owners having to go through kind of a complicated process as it currently is. Really not much changing to the table here. One thing I would note is that I did go back and added a footnote for, for detached signs. So for signs in the R1L, R1M, and R2, just making note that they're limited to multi-unit dwellings, non-residential uses, and the second footnote that we added here, which is already applicable to other districts, but now applicable to that one as well, is that the detached sign is only allowed when the building itself, if it was pre-existing, is 20 or more feet away from the street, or from the property line. Just not wanting to have a whole bunch of freestanding signs throughout all the districts. This does a better job of accommodating properties that are often set back. Again, just, you know, I think there were some comments and questions on some of the larger sign sizes that you would see in the column that's highlighted in red here. And that's a little misleading just because you know, where it might say 200 square feet, we're not talking about one 200 square foot sign, we're talking about the cumulative size or area of all the detached signs that they might be permitted, so adding those up. So it's not nearly as large as it might sound if you're just looking at the cumulative size of all signs. Again, just some examples. These were two signs we looked at last time that under the existing code would not be allowed based on the district that they're in. But if you add the provision where they're where they're only allowed if the building is set back 20 or more feet, you know, these are two out of many examples that would now be qualified to have a sign. Again, this is just a comparison of the square footage for freestanding signs. So looking at the bottom right-hand side, that would be the 100 square foot sign. Again, smaller than a lot of existing signs in that area, but still we believe to be large enough to display your pertinent information. Here again, just highlighting all the non-conforming signs. This is just one segment of Central Ave, but all the areas you see here, all those signs that are in the green box, those are all legally non-conforming. They wouldn't be in full compliance with the code under what we're proposing, but they'd be a lot closer, so that new signs that are proposed in this district could be closer to compliance. Well, would be in compliance, but would be more similar to what their competitors or other business owners might have in that area. That's largely it for the presentation. The other thing I know that came out was the severability. We do have the severability in there. I think it may have just been missed because of how the ordinance is split up, but it is at the end. I know there's a question of whether it should be at the beginning or the end. I believe almost all of the sections of code in the city ordinance, not just the USDO, put the severability at the end, which is pretty common practice, just to make it clear that it's covering everything that you just went through in that ordinance. I'll make sure if I catched everything. The menu boards is in here. Again, it does make reference to how they're regulated, and they're kind of placed in their own separate category just because they're not, you wouldn't place them under a detached sign. They have their own kind of set of regulations. They're treated a little bit differently. And then the last thing that I can remember that came up was in regard to the non-conforming section. So that's all still in there. It had just moved sections. And that's the last thing that we did add to the current pending proposed amendment you see tonight, where we included language about the off-premises signs in the non-conforming section that had mistakenly been omitted. But going through it again, we had added that back in so that it's now in the section about legally non-conforming signs, and it just makes it very clear that we're also including provisions for the for signs such as like billboards that are under a different regulating status. So you have on-premise signs and then an off-premise sign. But I'll end it there, and if there's any questions, happy to go through it in more detail.
Okay, questions from committee members? Okay, I'll get started. Actually, Councilwoman Seaman, did you have a question?
No, I did not, thank you.
Okay, so I'll get started. I'm looking at page 15, the new proposal. I'm looking at the map in front of page 15. That's Central Avenue. There you go. So how hard would it be to extend that out on Central Avenue, swim it all the way down? 'Cause I know we've got a lot of businesses we're trying to get back up and running. A lot of vacancies. We want to make sure we give them as many options as possible. So when I'm looking at that, it cuts off probably on Central and North Island, if not even farther up, probably more like, that's not,
Yeah, it cuts off just before that. Yep.
yeah. How do we extend that out, and is it possible to extend that out on Central Avenue? I mean, just to narrow it out to Central, is that a possibility?
That would be separately, so this is just reflecting of the existing zoning district. So I guess if you want to do a zoning map amendment, if that's what you're referring to. If it's just to address signs, I don't think I would encourage that. There is a shift in like the types of businesses and the uses that are allowed from the MUCH, and I think that goes into a form-based Central Ave district at that end. Could be wrong, but there would be a lot of other considerations in terms of you would now be allowing more uses that are of a larger commercial or industrial kind of intensity, and it would also change some of the provisions for your building height and setbacks.
So how does this change benefit those smaller businesses that are between well, let me not just say Henry Johnson, let me go all the way to the end of Central Avenue, which is Lark Street, all the way to Everett Road, where you have a lot of the more smaller mom and pop operations that have been dealing with a lot of the same issues as the bigger car dealerships. Not that we don't like our bigger car dealerships, they're part of our community and we appreciate them and we appreciate their businesses, but I also want to make sure that we are looking at how we can make it easier for those smaller businesses that are also struggling with signage.
Yep. Yeah, so those districts would largely be right after your residential ones, so looking on the left. So one of the main things is they would now be entitled to 2 signs per frontage as opposed to 1. Almost all of those businesses tend to have 2 signs already, kind of, especially if they're an older business. It would also, so it would keep the 24 square feet for some of those districts for just the single sign. Some districts would see an increase now to 32 square feet, but it would also allow them to have a cumulative size of 32 square feet, whereas before they could only have the 24. So it's I guess, a more modest increase in the amount of signage they can have, and trying to have offering them a little more flexibility in the types of signs, So a lot of businesses on that area that you're referring to, they might want a wall sign and a projecting sign because they're kind of attracting two different types of customers. Maybe it's someone who's a pedestrian versus like a, a vehicle that's coming down the road. As of right now, they'd only be allowed to have either the wall or the projecting. This would allow, say, essentially, you can have either and or both. You just have to make it kind of fit into these parameters.
Okay. So Central Avenue, what is Central Avenue, Lower Everett Road, Lower North Island? What is that classified?
A lot of that's going to be the MUFC, so the Form-Based Central Ave District. So that's, get the mouse.
That's
So it's going to be, a lot of that's going to be this right here, with some of the districts that kind of come off of Central being either your MUNE or MUNC. It does change a little bit, but it's, I believe the area that you're referring to is mostly MUFC.
Okay. And outside of the Central Avenue business area, what other major areas are affected by the MUNC? Is that more like,
The MUNC, you said?
is that what's being classified, MUNE or MUNC?
Yeah, so those are the less intensive zoning districts. So you could think of areas along, Lark is largely split between MUNE, MUNC. A lot of your like smaller corridors, so parts of New Scotland would be zoned that way as well. So that's like some of your smaller businesses, bars, restaurants, cafes. Those are typically going to be in those districts. So they're kind of like the corridors between your residential zoning districts and then your more intensive MUCU, MUCH districts. They're really split like all over the city in terms of the MUNE, MUNC zoning districts.
Okay, and we're giving those more modest increases.
Yeah, they're largely already, like, the signs that they typically are looking to put up are closer to what the code currently provides, but not always, and this would just allow that flexibility for more signage. So a lot of them right now are asking for 2 signs, when they're only allowed 1, this would allow them that extra sign.
Okay, because I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from my Central Avenue businesses that they'd like to have more flexibility. And I know you're aware of that because we've had some of those conversations. Okay, I won't hog up the time. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, can you also go over any changes? I know you went through some changes that were brought up last meeting that you were able to, address. Any of the concerns that were brought up that you were not able to address?
No, I don't believe there were any that we weren't able to address, either just through kind of showing what was in there or just by going back and making some very small clarifications. And in talking with the person who provided the comments, I believe they were satisfied with everything that was made. So no, I don't believe there's anything outstanding that hadn't been addressed.
Okay, so you were able to address the concerns that former Councilwoman Judy Doche had, as well as Councilmember Hoey had?
I'm trying to remember what specifically Councilmember Hoey had asked about, but yeah, from all the notes I had and going through the meeting, I didn't have anything that was outstanding or that hasn't been addressed in the code itself.
Okay. And you were able to address those concerns directly with former Councilwoman Doche as well?
What was that? You
were able to address these concerns directly with former Councilwoman Doge as well?
Yep.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Like I mentioned at the last meeting, Councilwoman Doge was a huge part of the rewrite of the USDO in 2021. So I want to make sure we address her concerns. Give them the due. Okay. Any other questions or statements from committee members? Do I have a motion to move this out of committee with a positive recommendation?
I will make a motion to move ordinance 65, 111, 24 out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Just want to make, just want to make sure. Okay, so it passes unanimously. Thank you, thank you for your work on this. I know you and staff have taken a lot of time on this for some time, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate your willingness to go back and look at all the concerns that were brought up at the last meeting and try to ease as many people's minds as possible. So it is
Yeah,
fully
not a problem.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going back to this, our Sustainability Committee questions. So I'm going to go back. So we got 19 minutes before we've got to disassemble. So I'm going to say, let's go into executive session, let's have a quick talk, and we'll go from there. Can I have a motion to go into executive session to address personnel from a board?
Make a motion to move into executive session to discuss the names, consideration, appointments, excuse me. I make a motion to move into executive committee to discuss personal matters then, I guess that's.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, so we're going to go into executive session to discuss the different individuals that have applied. I think we have 5 applicants to discuss. Thank you, everybody. candidates. Unfortunately, we're only able to select 2. I want to encourage all those who are not selected to please get involved and engage through the committee's opportunities through the Sustainability Commission. So there was multiple opportunities for people to get engaged. Unfortunately, this is always a very difficult selection process because we have always and continue to get a large pool of very qualified individuals. But the committee has met privately and have selected 2 names to be moved forward. So at this point, we're going to keep those names. We're going to move forward a motion that does not share the names until we can reach out to all the candidates and address them directly and privately. So at this moment, I'd like if someone put a motion forward to move forward with the 2 candidates have been discussed and selected in executive session for a vote at our next council meeting.
No, I'll do it.
No, I'm asking for a motion, please.
Make the motion to move forward with the 2 candidates selected from our executive session.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. So now we've selected those 2 positions to get filled, and hopefully can bring it to the next council meeting. And staff will reach out to all candidates and let them know who were selected. Okay, sounds great. Any other questions or concerns? If I hear none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.